Welcome to another live Third Apron podcast. I'm your host, Yossi Goslin. We are 2 days away from the start of free agency. We already are in that period where teams are negotiating with their players. We've gotten a lot of not too much stuff since right after the draft. It seems like everybody needed to cool down, including the league. Quiet day yesterday. League got pretty active today, including the news. We'll start with this. Lonzo Ball. The Chicago Bulls are trading Lonzo Ball to the Cleveland Cavaliers straight up for Isaac Okoro. Another trade that, upon first seeing the reporting, I think everyone collectively is like, wait, that's it?
Yeah, it was the Alex Caruso trade all over again, right? Not to the same extent. Caruso's better than Lonzo. It was a similar concept where we all kind of just sat around thinking, wait, where is there going to pick involved in this? I really like this for Cleveland. I feel like there are a lot of people looking at this and saying Lonzo is such a health risk. Like, why is this such a win for Cleveland? And I kind of feel like saying, like, he's replacing Ty Jerome. Ty Jerome is not the picture of health either. So this makes a lot of sense for me. It's only really a 1-year commitment because he has the team option. So you also got out of the second year on Isaac Okoro if you wanted to. He's a better defender than Ty Jerome. You're not going to get the individual scoring from him, but I don't think they needed it. They have plenty of sources of points. Points weren't the thing they were lacking. I will say they were 10th in pace, but they were 19th in fast break points and 28th in passes per game. Lonzo is going to be pretty helpful on that front, where he's going to inject a little bit more ball movement, a little bit more pace. I think that's going to be helpful for them. It's just another element. Their offense clearly did not need help, but it's a different dimension, which I like for them. And he's still a very, very good defender. You have to limit his minutes, but again, he played 22 minutes a game last year and Ty Jerome played 19. So it's not like he's replacing a 32-minute starter. He's like coming in as like a 20-ish minute a game backup. I think he's a really good player. I think a lot of teams wanted him. And I think yet again, we've learned that trading with the Bulls is this totally illogical exercise where you can offer good draft capital for a player, but if you don't have like a young-ish, not great looking lottery guy to trade them that they irrationally like, then you're kind of just out of luck, right? Like Memphis wanted Lonzo Ball at the deadline. I think they were willing to do the Marcus Smart deal that they did with the number 18 pick. I think that's probably what the Bulls should have done. I think there are other teams interested at a similar price point. I have some thoughts on what the Bulls are thinking, but from the Cleveland side, yeah, this is a pretty good trade.
So you're saying you wouldn't rather have Isaac Okoro making 11 million than Marcus Smart expiring 22 million and a first round pick?
Yeah, I think I'm comfortable with what I'm saying there. Yeah.
So
And by the way, like
I'll
Marcus Smart could have been helpful for them, right? Like I know he's not like a long-term play. I do think Marcus Smart has something to offer as a player still. And you get a first round pick, that's 4 years of cost control. In your best case scenario where Isaac Okoro becomes the player that you want him to be, you have him for 2 pretty cheap years, and then you have to pay him a lot on top of that. And you're not winning a championship in those 2 years, right? There's not really much value to be squeezed out of that. So it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. It's really impossible to predict what the Bulls are going to do. This is just another one of those trades because if I was told, hey, either the Bulls accept this trade or they keep Lonzo and just run out his deal, I would have guessed the latter is more likely to happen. I think the best way to look at replacing Ty Jerome with Lonzo Ball, again, not official that that's what's happening, but I think that's all indications that that's probably what's going to happen. The Cavs didn't even expect Ty Jerome to play this well. They brought him in at just like a little above the minimum. And I think they had an idea of what he could be as a backup guard, an inexpensive backup guard, while they have two max guards. He wasn't supposed to be this guy who ends up playing like 24 minutes in playoff games, really being dependent on. They needed that with the injury to Darius Garland. But realistically, the Cavs, when they're fully healthy, they're not going to be playing Ty Jerome that much in the playoffs. So in the long run, it doesn't make as much sense to pay him, whatever he might get full mid-level money when you're not going to play him as much. But I do think that he was somewhat of a luxury with the shooting. Now they brought back Sam Merrill. We'll get into that. They still have Craig Porter Jr. They needed a point of attack defender. And I think that's a big source of those Darius Garland for Jalen Suggs rumors came from, where they do need one guy who could defend the perimeter. And I think it makes a lot of sense to bring in Lonzo. Yes, the injuries is going to be a big risk at all the time. He's probably not going to play that much in these next coming years, but if you can get him rested and ready for the playoffs, I think you can argue that he might be more valuable in the playoffs for what he brings that no one else on the Cavs and the Cavs backcourt does than have another good scorer shooter in Ty Jerome. So I like it for the Cavs, a good way to help with, not only replacing the loss of Jerome, but getting, not spending too much money just by replacing Okoro's salary. And then they're able to bring back Sam Merrill a little later. We'll on a, what is it, 4 for 38. So as far as that move, yeah, I like it for the Cavs. Just hopefully, as long as Lonzo stays healthy and makes it through the playoffs, it's a home run.
He's never going to play another back-to-back again, and I don't think he should, right? Like they didn't last year. I thought they made pretty well in Chicago. And remember, the Cavs don't play their guys a lot of minutes either, right? Like they were playing these super deep rotations in the regular season as well. And that's part of why Ty Jerome like played as well as he did and played as much as he did in the playoffs, right? Like Kenny Atkinson does really believe in playing deep rotations, getting rest for his starters, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's a really good fit for him. It's interesting to me. And by the way, if it's totally justifiable, Cleveland has now bolted past the second apron, right? They're not even close to it. But if you were going to do that, I do think that this was the circumstance to do it under, right? They're not a repeat taxpayer, so they're not paying the extra taxes that way. They haven't paid the second apron yet, so they have a couple of years where like a single frozen draft pick is not going to kill them. They could even do it for 2 years before a pick moves down to number 30. And they're in such a wide open Eastern Conference that if having Sam Merrill is like the difference between, being an overwhelming number one seed that's like that much more dominant in the playoffs and not, like I think it makes sense for them, right? This is the circumstance in which it makes sense to go totally past the second apron. So just good bit of business all around for Cleveland. And then the last thing is they won 64 games last year. If Lonzo Ball has to skip a month in the middle of the season, then so be it. Who cares, right? Their cushion is going to be so overwhelming in the regular season, assuming they're anything like they were last year, that like they can be as cautious as they want with Lonzo. As long as you get him to April 15th relatively healthy, you feel pretty good.
Yeah. Uh, let's take a look at the Cavs stuff really quickly because I was kind of back and forth in terms of what they might do. I thought at first I was thinking they would let Ty Jerome go, maybe even trade a guy like Jared Allen to save money. Then once the Garland injury, once we learned the severity of it, I kind of switched sides. Like, oh, now I think they're going to spend a lot of money, even bring back Ty Jerome with Garland expected to miss the start of the season. So most likely he's not going to return. So I've got Lonzo in for Okoro now. Sam Merrill, I'll assume he gets the full 8% raises, which would start him as low as this $8.5 million. I'm gonna have them decline Chuma Okeke. Maybe they bring him back on a 1-year minimum. It's a little bit of savings. There's reporting that they're going to assign Tyrese Proctor to a rookie minimum deal. So they're looking at a $390 million roster. They blow way over the second apron. And I think they have this, I think it's like a 2-year window. They're going to spend as much as possible. Technically, yeah, they could still bring back Jerome, spend even more. They would like blow past 400 million to be like a $500 million roster if they bring back Jerome at this point. I don't expect them to do quite that. I don't think that they're going to improve their highest end percentages that much more at this point. It just seems like inefficient to spend that much more money. So they have this 2-year window where they're going to spend a lot. They're going to probably be the highest, most expensive team. The East is as open as it's ever been in our lifetimes, which sounds crazy, but now with all these Achilles injuries going around, this really is the Cavs. These next 2 years are there. After that, Donovan Mitchell's got his player option. They'll reevaluate after that. But if they get a title within the next 2 years, it'll be money well spent.
Yeah, it feels like now, especially in Apron World, we're so clear on what the timelines are for every team, right? The Knicks are 3 years. The Cavs are 2 years. The Thunder have one more cheap year, then they have two theoretical super expensive years, maybe three, depending on how they structure things and whether or not Holmgren or Williams get the Rose Roll Max. But like we have these totally defined timelines. But for these next 2 years, Cleveland, barring something crazy, should be the favorite in the Eastern Conference both years, right? Like now is the time to do this. We'll evaluate the future later, but like they're here right now. This makes total sense. Let's talk about this from the Bulls side, though. I have a theory on what I think the Bulls are trying to accomplish. I just don't agree with it. I think that they're trying to do this the way that the Pacers did, where they didn't tank. And if you look at the kinds of players they're going after, there are a lot of similarities, right? A lot of second draft guys, right? Giddy would be quote unquote their Tyrese Halliburton as like this unconventional ball handler. Isaac Okoro might be a little bit like their Aaron Nesmith, this athletic defensive guy who did not shoot well with his first team, but like maybe he'll get it right in the next team. I think that's the logic that they're using, but I just want to say building that way has such a small margin for error, and it relies so heavily on your ability as a front office to evaluate talent and your coaching staff to develop it. Rick Carlisle's not your coach, and you do not have the infrastructural competence that Indiana does, where the Pacers have been doing this middle out build successfully for like 30, 40 years. Like, this is just the way they've always done it. That's an organization I trust to operate that way. The Bulls are not that, right? And if you think Josh Giddey is going to be your Tyrese Halliburton, Josh Giddey is just not that good, right? Like Tyrese Halliburton is a top 5, top 10, whatever driver of team offense in the entire NBA. There's really no evidence that Josh Giddey can be that besides a very, very good stretch in March when they were only playing tanking teams or teams that were really, really injured, right? Like Okoro, at least with Nesmith, he was a shooter coming out of college. That's what he was marketed as. He just didn't shoot well in Boston because he was barely playing. Okoro has never been a good shooter, like at any point. He's going to help them defensively. They were 25th in half court defense last year. But you know who else is good defensively is Lonzo Ball. And you know who else fits into that, like, have a lot of pace, have a lot of creation, have a lot of ball handling style is Lonzo Ball. So I feel like what they're trying to accomplish might have been more successfully accomplished if they just kept Lonzo Ball. Like, Lonzo Ball's a good player. You didn't have to trade him. You got him signed to a pretty good contract. I would have traded him because I would have wanted future assets and picks. But if you're going to do it this way, I'd just rather keep Lonzo Ball. I guess they just look at this and say Okoro is kind of a sure thing where you can mostly expect him to stay healthy. You know what he's going to be. He kind of overlaps with a lot of the athletic wings that can't shoot that are already on that team, including the one that's making $90 million and just isn't a good player in Patrick Williams. So I think I see what they're trying to accomplish. I think I know how they're going to try to justify it. I just don't agree with their philosophy.
Well, the thing is, I'm not even sure what exactly the strategy is as far as what team building philosophy they're going for, what kind of offense it is they're trying to run, or anything like that. I think they just have these high valuations on these specific guys that they're bringing in. And like to them, when they did the Caruso trade for Giddey trade last year, they clearly value Josh Giddey as a much better basketball player than Alex Caruso. Same thing here. I mean, maybe it's a little different with Lonzo's injury. They could be trying to just get ahead of that by getting in a player they like, but same thing. They must value Isaac Okoro more than any other team in the league for them to, to do this and not get any picks in return. Not even like a second or two. Because the Cavs are getting a lot of future flexibility as well. Lonzo Ball's got a team option next year for $10 million, where Okoro is guaranteed for like a $12 million. There's a lot of value in that for the Cavs as well. There's a lot of value in that for the Cavs, and I don't think the Bulls really got compensated for that. So as far as like, I don't know. So I don't know if they're looking at it like, oh, we're trying to redo what the Pacers are doing, because Tyrese Halliburton makes everyone a lot better. Like if you're gonna compare the roster that the Pacers had versus like who the Cavs who were injured and like the Knicks, like I think the Knicks objectively have a more talented starting roster than the Pacers do. But Tyrese Halliburton was just so good and made everyone else so much better. And Giddey's not that. He's not going to be that. Like you'd have to come a long way for him to be like that level of like helping, if that makes sense on offense. So yeah, I think the Bulls are just kind of more or less the same. Like at least they got a defender back where they went from trading the best perimeter defender in the league, arguably in Alex Caruso, to a guy who can't really defend in Giddey. At least they go kind of stay a little neutralish defensively with this trade, go a little younger. So I kind of get that. I kind of get that aspect a little bit. I think they should have just gotten a little more value. If you could have gotten a couple second round picks, I don't think everyone would be clowning them quite as much. What do you think of the Sam Merrill deal?
Fair. I've sort of had him pegged as like above tax mid-level, below full mid-level. So the numbers are about right. I like that you're not putting any options on it. This is pretty similar to some of the other deals we've seen for like the one-dimensional shooter types. Like Sam Hauser was in the similar range where he was at $10 million a year. I think that's around where we're at. Like, I think the days of Duncan Robinson getting 18 to 20 a year are probably through. You have to be such a high level shooter and have to have other things to your game to justify that. And even Duncan Robinson had like kind of added some stuff off the dribble over the years, and he's bigger too. And even that deal feels like it's been a little heavy on Miami's books. So I think this is probably around the price range we're going to see for the one-dimensional shooter types like Merrill. So it feels like good value, and I'm glad that they're bringing him back. I'm glad that they're willing to put forth the money it's going to take to maximize this championship window in the next couple of years. Dan Gilbert, to his credit, he has not been a perfect owner in a lot of ways. He has always been willing to spend money, right? There are a lot of other owners that are a little calmer, a little bit less involved in basketball matters, but Dan Gilbert has paid the tax when he's needed to. So kudos to him and kudos to the Cavs. Barring something unexpected, they will be my pick to win the Eastern Conference.
So a couple comparisons on the highest end in terms of recent guys, because yeah, you mentioned Duncan Robinson. You could also talk about how guys in the past like Joe Harris, Davis Bertans, like pure specialists that had like a couple insanely hot seasons. Like Joe Harris was shooting close to 50% from three at some point. These guys were getting like close to $20 million a year. It seems like those days are done. All those contracts did not work out for the teams that signed them to them. So now it seems like that market's kind of scaled back a bit, where you still have those mistakes from time to time, like the Suns and Grayson Allen. They gave them that deal that averages like
Bird
15,
rights
16
trap.
a year. Yeah. Then as you get a little lower, there's Isaiah Joe, but that deal, I guess that's the more apt comparison, except the Thunder still went pretty high on that, but they could afford to with their cap planning, and it's decreasing. So that's a great deal. Uh, so Merrill's comes down a little bit closer. I mean, a little lower than that. So if you want to compare, there might be some other ones I'm not really thinking of, but it's pretty good value for the type of player he is in comparison to other ones. I wonder, different kind of player, but I just now it kind of gets me thinking what the market might be for a guy like Ochai Agbaji. He's going to be extension eligible. Uh, I feel like this is good for him. Maybe he'll probably get a little more than what Merrill got. Um, I have a theory about how early free agency is beneficial to some types of players, and I'll get into that in a sec. But we first also should talk about the other main signing that happened last night. Naz Reid agreeing to decline his $15 million player option, re-sign with the Timberwolves for 5 years, $125 million, fully guaranteed, player option at the end. What are your thoughts on this?
This is the sort of contract that you give to somebody if you expect them to be starting, maybe not right away, but this is not a long-term six-man contract to me. This is like eventually we think you're going to be a starter. And that's a really interesting place for Minnesota to be because right now the widespread expectation is that in some fashion, Julius Randle is back on the team and Nickeil Alexander-Walker is not. So are they going to continue to pay three big men expensive market value contracts? And I guess Terrence Shannon and Rob Dillingham will fill in for Alexander Walker. I would presume that's the plan, but I have a hard time seeing them keeping three big men at this price on their team for the long term. So what I kind of wonder about, we'll see what Julius Randle's official decision is, but I suspect he's going to opt in because there's nowhere for him to go. Are they planning to just let Julius Randle go at the end of the season or trade him in season, by the way? Like, I know there's a lot of people are very excited about Minnesota. And whenever people list the Western Conference contenders, there's an obligation to say, oh, don't rule out Minnesota. Don't forget the Timberwolves because they made the Western Conference Finals 2 years in a row. They really weren't a traditional Western Conference Finals team last year. They were 6th seed. They were two wins above the 8th seed. They beat the Warriors in the second round with no Stephen Curry. They got a perfect matchup against the Lakers in the first round. I think we have to think of them now in the post Karl Towns world as more of like a 7 to 5 seed sort of team. And I think what's going to happen, and I think what they're wisely planning for, is they're going to go into this season and they're probably going to look more like that, where you're probably more in the pace of like a 46 to 48 win team than somebody who's like really in line to compete with the Houstons and the Oklahoma Cities of the world. So I wouldn't be surprised if their plan is for Julius Randle not to be on this team in the somewhat close future and for Naz Reid to step in as the starting power forward. So that's kind of my first thought when I saw the contract was this is not a 6-man deal.
Well, Sam, what you just said is like exactly what I think people were thinking about the Wolves right after they did the cat trade. That event, the plan is for Naz Reid to eventually start. That, especially me, I was saying it doesn't seem like they really wanted to bring in Julius Randle. It seems like this was more of an elevate Naz and bring in Dante in that pick and save money to have a deeper roster type trade. And I felt that after they made that trade, that yeah, instead of being a home court team, they might drop somewhere a little lower, which they did. And if things break right, okay, maybe they make a nice deep run. So I think we're kind of like just running back exactly the same analysis. Like, yeah, I think they're kind of in the same spot as far as this year goes. As far as the contract, so I've seen someone throw out that this is exactly what John Collins got, and that's 4 years ago. And John Collins was coming off that Hawks run; he was really vital to that, and that's also 4 years ago. The cap has risen much higher since. So you can look at this deal and feel like, wow, like if he's getting that deal now, it's a much lower percentage of the cap, roughly 13% of the cap. So you can look at it optimistically like that, but it's still pretty, yes, high, a lot of money for a guy who's still projecting to come off the bench, a guy that wasn't all that good in the later rounds of the playoffs. And this is where I want to like where I'm starting to think about now. This is year 2 now of free agency where they changed it, where teams can start negotiating with their own players, and it's been like I'm guessing it's like for us it's like fun. We get an earlier start to free agency. We get to see some deals agreed to a little earlier, helps with pacing, stuff like that. But I wonder if it's starting to have an impact on these negotiations favorably for players at the mid-level and above. Because technically, these teams are like, in theory, negotiating with themselves. So once you can start these negotiations formally, and it's just a theory, you could push back if you don't agree, kind of helps that, if the team's really not bidding against anybody, then I feel like that helps the player, helps them get an advantage to get a deal now that's more favorable to them. And maybe there's a fear at that point, hey, if you started negotiations, and you're not gonna like close the deal, maybe there's some apprehension on the team side of that scenario happening where they couldn't get something done and then he ends up becoming a free agent. So that's my theory. I feel like this has helped, and I think we can like talk. When I look back at some of the deals that happened last year, I'm starting to feel like that this has benefited certain players like mid-level and up, help them get more money.
Well, yeah, because the only team that can go above the mid-level this offseason, well, for now it's Brooklyn. We'll talk about some teams that have some other ways above that, but like this is not a good market for guys who want to make like between 25 and 35 million dollars a year. It's very hard to change teams and get that kind of money for a variety of reasons right now. So I do think it makes sense if you're a player who's above that to sign earlier, because then you don't have to find out what the market really thinks of you, right? You can do the thing where there are the rumors post where the insiders write, oh, so and so is interested in this player, so like their original team should really be on the lookout. I think you generally want to get ahead of it. And I think the teams kind of look at it and say, if it's fair money, we're good with it, right? If we think he's better than a mid-level player, let's just pay him. And they're keeping him for 5 years is the other thing. That was the other thing that really caught me. How many teams aside from Oklahoma City ever sign bench players to 5-year deals? It's pretty rare.
Yeah. So if you're wondering, well, what was Naz Reid's leverage when there's only one cap space team and it didn't even seem like they're like going to go after Naz Reid? Well, one, Naz Reid's biggest leverage is that they traded Karl-Anthony Towns. Like the minute they made that trade, Naz Reid made a lot of money because that trade was a big bet on Naz Reid, and they absolutely cannot afford to let him go. Like when you look at the hierarchy of the free agents, they have Julius Randle and Naz Reid are like 1A, 1B, and then you got Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who now based on the Naz Reid deal seems like Alexander Walker might not come back. So yeah, he did have a lot of internally I think that this was just something that was coming for a while as soon as the cat trade happened. So I guess this is a good way to transition to Nickeil Alexander-Walker, because now this deal will put the Wolves like right up against the second apron. This is assuming Julius Randle is brought back, even if he just opts in. So I think with Julius Randle, what they might end up trying to do is restructure his deal, get him to decline it, and maybe even just get him to take like the same amount of money. And the reason for that is I think they just want to like eliminate these incentives. You do that, instead of being 2 million below the second apron, now you're 4 million. I'm not saying that's going to be a way to help bring back Nickeil Alexander-Walker, but it just seems like it's better for the cap sheet if you get rid of those incentives. So I would expect Randle either opts in or he is going to get a restructured deal. But I wanted to talk about just something. It was on, there's a lot of teams being rumored for Nickeil Alexander-Walker. First, it's been like teams like the Lakers with the full mid-level. Then perhaps a team like Atlanta that has that trade exception so they can beat the full mid-level. Today, I think it was today, Jake Fisher was streaming. He was talking about how the Detroit Pistons, there's Schroeder might not come back, and that the Pistons have been signaling to teams they might be using about 25 million in cap space, which one would have been another way for Naz Reid to get exactly what he just did. But two, that perhaps this could help to bring in Nickeil Alexander-Walker. So with that all in mind, like, what are your thoughts on all that?
So the Nickeil Alexander-Walker situation is so fascinating because teams are kind of jumping in and out of the bidding so much. Like the Lakers were not in that bidding until this afternoon, when it started to really seem like Dorian Finney-Smith might be opting out because they weren't going to have the non-tax mid-level. If the Lakers do have the non-tax mid-level and they're willing to give him a starting job, which that I don't know that they're going to be able to do, but if they were, they would jump to the top of the non-tax mid-level teams, right? If you can start with the Lakers, contend in LA, the money being equal, that's probably where he goes. But if Detroit is going above that, now you have a different question. And I do think he could start for Detroit because Jaden Ivey is also a point guard. I don't know if they want to start Jaden Ivey next to Cade Cunningham. You still want to get him a lot of minutes, or you could maybe you could even trade him. Like maybe you don't have faith in Jaden Ivey long term. I personally do. I'd love to have Jaden Ivey on my team. But if they're not thinking Jaden Ivey is the long-term backcourt partner to Cade Cunningham, like maybe that's one of the guys they're thinking of moving. So if you're going above the non-tax mid-level, the money can get to such a point where like role destination, that stuff doesn't matter as much. He hasn't made any money in his career, right? Like now's his chance to get paid. I think he's going to take it. Like you mentioned off air, could they do something like what Indiana did for Bruce Brown, where you blow everybody out of the water on AAV, where it's like 25 a year instead of 15, but it's a shorter term deal? That could make sense for them too, because they have all of these young guys that they're going to have to pay in the next couple of years, where Asar Thompson is 2 years away from his rookie extension. Ivy is 1 year away. Like Jalen Duren is 1 year away, I think, as well. So doing something shorter term at a higher number does make sense for them. How would they keep Malik Beasley in this scenario? Like, would they be able to keep his cap hold on the books and then like dump somebody else? Is that what you're thinking?
So as far as Malik Beasley, so assuming they just renounce Hardaway and Schroeder, they could either bring back Malik Beasley, yeah, on his non-bird because it's the same thing, the 7.2 million eating up his cap hold, but they could also just, depending how much money it would take to theoretically sign Nickeil Alexander-Walker, maybe they have some left over to re-sign him, or the rumored level, that $8.8 million amount. So I think they'll have plenty of avenues to bring him back as well. I do want to touch on that point you made about them potentially Bruce Browning him, because let's say that all teams with the full mid-level exception are basically out of it. So this is teams like the Lakers, for example, that were the $14 million exception. Even if they have the full access to it, it's not going to be enough now. I think that still beats a potential sign and trade to the Hawks, who could technically do like they can get up to 25 million technically. They're not going to do that. I don't think either the Pistons would if they had that much to spend. But when you do a sign and trade, it has to be 3 years, no options. Versus with cap space, the Pistons can just give Alexander Walker whatever it is for like a 2-year deal, exactly what the Pacers did with Bruce Brown, even put a team option on the second year, given more optionality. So if the Pistons are indeed making a play for cap space to sign just about, or any free agent for that matter, and it's going to be like a short-term deal, I would probably favor them at this point as the team most likely to get that free agent.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then the other thing, just on a very simple level, the Hawks do not have a starting job to offer, right? Like their starting five is going to be Trae Young, Dyson Daniels, Zachary Reese-Shea, Jalen Johnson, and whichever center they end up starting. So they don't have a starting job to offer. They could appeal to Minnesota, where like Minnesota would probably love to get back that second first round pick Atlanta has if they're willing to like help out on that front. But if Detroit just has cap space, that's kind of irrelevant. Then the other thing I kind of wondered about is like, could you get a 3-way sign and trade going where Dorian Finney-Smith goes to Houston, Cam Whitmore goes to Minnesota, and Alexander Walker comes to the Lakers at above the mid-level? But I don't think like that's unrealistic, right? That's not something you can really anticipate. But I would say Detroit probably in the driver's seat for him if they're going to create that cap space. But we've brought up the Lakers here a few times, and I just kind of want to go broad on them for a second. I promised my Twitter followers that I had some Lakers takes to uncork. So we've got a couple of things going on here today. Number one, McMenamin reports LeBron likely to pick up his player option at 52.6 million. Number two, it seems like Dorian Finney-Smith might opt out and test free agency. And that's a little bit strange to me, especially if the Lakers can't get Alexander Walker, because there's just nobody out there that can replace him. You'd just be losing him for nothing. And even if you do sign Alexander Walker, you're using your mid-level to do that. So that's a tool that you've suddenly lost if you're trying to find a center. It doesn't seem right now like that Alexander Walker's really in the cards. It seems more like they're going to use the tax mid-level, just sign like a Brook Lopez or whatever. But Brook Lopez is 37. So I'm kind of connecting some dots here, right? Lakers seem hesitant to give several years to Finney-Smith. LeBron presumably opting in at that 52.6 million. What does that tell me? Well, I want to start with LeBron and say him opting in means one of two things. Either the Lakers offered him an opt-out with a player option for next year, or he didn't want one. It's one of the two, because I think the logical solution here for both sides would have been LeBron opting out, taking less money to help the team, and then getting a player option for next year. The fact that he's opting in indicates to me that they're not thinking about the partnership with LeBron beyond next year. Obviously, anything can change. They can deal with that on the fly. But I do think for the time being, it seems like they're emphasizing the future in their moves. And that's part of why they may not want to sign Dorian Finney-Smith to this, several year deal that you can get with a mid-level elsewhere, because Dorian Finney-Smith is in his 30s, right? And you're thinking if you have him on your team, it's because you're pushing to win right now. And it doesn't necessarily seem like the Lakers are doing that. It seems like they're looking for a 1-year stopgap at center, which is why Brook Lopez is coming up a lot. And frankly, I don't think that's a good basketball fit, independent of his age. I don't think that's the skill set you want on a Luka Doncic team. But it seems like they're kind of planning to reorient this roster with cap space next year. And that would involve LeBron not being on the team. And I guess Dorian Finney-Smith not being on the team either. Now, getting Dorian Finney-Smith off the team at mid-level money is very different than getting LeBron off the team at max money. But they're not operating like a team right now that expects to be paying LeBron a ton of money for the 26-27 season. It seems like they're kind of just thinking, let's hold this together for 1 year and then really reorient around Luka a year from now.
I think that's as far as like kind of thinking about post LeBron in 26, 27. I think that's definitely in play, especially because the potential of them having major cap space in 2026 requires them to not include LeBron making a lot of money. So I'm thinking though that a lot of the reporting coming out about him potentially picking up his player option, uh, I'm just thinking that the Lakers just not really going to get anyone big in free agency. And if you've been listening to this conversation where how we're talking about guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, where that's going, it seems like there really not a lot of good options for them. It seems like there might not be any big deals available to them with their lack of assets that can significantly improve them and nothing that really requires him basically to take a salary reduction. I always made the argument that I think he probably should take something anyways, so they have more flexibility in the trade deadline, because Lakers didn't do anything last offseason, and then the Luka trade came then, so it's good to be prepared for then. But let's see what happens. I wonder if with the Dorian Finney-Smith stuff is if the Lakers' big situation, their options are so bad that they might be willing to let him go just so they can actually open up the full mid-level, because at this point that might be what they need to do to sign a Brook Lopez or a Clint Capella. Like I think it's gotten that the options are starting to get that dry. We'll see what happens. We're still 2 days ahead of free agency, but just seeing how free agency has developed so far, I'm kind of pessimistic about how they're going to come out of this now.
Well, yeah, I agree. And remember, it's not just free agency. You also have the trade market, and there haven't really been substantive reporting that they're close on anything, right? Like, we know they asked about Walker Kessler. As far as I understand it, that never got like close. I think Utah asked for a ton, and the Lakers for now seem hesitant to do that much. There have been talks about other centers. Nothing seemingly has come that close. But like, if you just let Dorian Finney-Smith go to sign a one center or even two centers for that matter, I don't know what you've really accomplished, right? Like, so what? You're still a 50-win team with no chance against Oklahoma City and Houston and the best teams. Getting Brook Lopez or Clint Capella or somebody like that probably isn't going to change much for you, right? Like, you were not just a center away against Minnesota. Having a center was the biggest issue, or rather, not having a center was the biggest issue. You also couldn't guard the ball at all. You've got to figure out a way to do that. The Lakers are not a one-hole team. If they were going to meaningfully compete yet next year, they probably needed two centers or one really good one, and then they hit on a minimum. They needed somebody to guard the ball. Like, they needed multiple things here, and they have just accomplished nothing thus far. They haven't been linked to any difference makers. I don't think Brook Lopez really does much of anything for anybody anymore beyond like in a 15 to 20 minute role. He certainly can't be a starter, right? Or at least he can't play traditional starter minutes anymore. He can't move, right? I don't know how many people watched the Bucks last year. He really is a totally stationary rim protector. And he was a totally stationary rim protector on a team with Giannis Antetokounmpo. The Lakers don't have a power forward like that, right? LeBron is super valuable on defense in high leverage moments. LeBron is not giving you that roaming help defense that Giannis does for 48 full minutes per game, or the 40 that he plays or whatever. Like, I think they really are operating right now as if they're kind of just waiting for the LeBron era to ride itself out, because next summer you not only have that cap space, but you also unlock your 2033 first round pick from a trade standpoint, And of course, the 2026 first round pick, which we would think is probably going to be in the 20s, that becomes tradable as well because it's going to be attached to a player. So your flexibility does open up significantly next offseason. It's just that LeBron is probably gone at that point. So you're really strictly thinking about the Luka era. And like, look, I'm not necessarily saying that's the craziest thing. I'm just saying it felt for a lot of last year like they did have a chance, like they were within spitting distance of if they got one right guy or two right guys, they might have had a shot. Like if they had been able to pull off a trade for Walker Kessler and then used the full mid level on whether it was Alexander Walker or somebody else, like some good perimeter help, I would have given them a chance. Maybe I wouldn't have picked them to win the conference, but I would have given them a chance. Now, with the way this is looking, if they're only going to get the Capella or Lopez types, no, I don't give them a chance. They're just not good enough. And by the way, like this is the last thing I have on this topic. I swear, the Lakers just got sold. Rob Pelinka is not going to get the same level of like treatment and leeway that he got from the Buss family because Mark Walter doesn't care if you were Kobe Bryant's agent. Bob Myers is out there right now. Masai Ujiri is out there right now. If you accomplish nothing this offseason and get bounced in the first round next year, there's no reason to bring Rob Pelinka back, frankly. Like, if that's how this plays out, if they just have the same season they just had, then Bob Myers is probably the GM of this team, or Masai Ujiri is probably the GM of this team, or whoever it is. So, like, if I were Rob Pelinka, I'd be feeling a fair bit of urgency right now to actually improve the team.
I'm with you. If they come out of this with just one of Lopez or Capella, theoretically, let's say Dorian Finney-Smith does walk, and then they waive Shake Milton. Like they could do the full mid-level and biannual path. So can you get your another serviceable backup big after? Yeah, I'm still not inspired by that. It definitely does not give me any confidence that they're going to be meaningfully better than they were last year, especially if they do end up losing Dorian Finney-Smith, who I really like this small ball line, this 5-out lineup they were doing. I would be trying to keep this. I think there is a line you got to hold with Dorian Finney-Smith, as you mentioned. He is getting a little older, early 30s. He and LeBron will know for sure what's going on with them tomorrow. I would definitely want to keep the wings. They finally basically are able to replace that level of wing depth that they had in 2020. Took them a while, but they're kind of there. They just need to get a formidable big man rotation, and that's probably not looking too good as far as free agency goes. Might take a little longer.
The best
Really quickly,
case scenario, though. So say you split the mid-level in half, right? Say you take the full mid-level, the 14.1, and you give half of it to Capella, half of it to Lopez, under the logic that you're still beating the tax mid-level teams with those offers. Then you have to build an entire perimeter defense with one tradable first round pick and your expiring contracts of Kleba and Vincent, and like maybe you include Rui, maybe you don't. I don't know if that's feasible. Like, could you then do the like Rui and connect for Wiggins trade? Could you trade for a different perimeter defender? I don't know. But like I came into this offseason with pretty grand designs on ways the Lakers could like actually build a championship contender that had some upside post LeBron. And right now it feels like they're mostly just thinking post LeBron.
we'll see if they could pull that off. It feels like the Spurs might be trying to do that. About an hour ago on the Stein line, they were reporting that the Spurs want to try to get Gershon Yabusele and Luke Cornet, which probably means that they would have them split the full mid level, so like $7 million a piece. Can the Lakers pull that off with like Lopez or Capella and maybe another big man? I don't know. I don't know how the big man market's really going to shake out at this point. Um, Really quickly though, we have a breaking trade midstream. Pretty minor one. I just want to go over it really quickly. But the Thunder, they resolved their roster crunch. They're going to trade Dylan Jones in, I think, 1 second for Colby Jones. They're going to waive him. Colby Jones got this little guarantee. So that's it. They balanced their roster, 15 players. They earlier moved off the other first round pick they have. They still have that team option on AJ Mitchell. Either they pick it up or they decline it and give him a new deal at the minimum. They just won the championship without paying the luxury tax. They're going to be well below the luxury tax again. Just you've got teams like the Cavs who we talked about earlier now just about to spend more luxury tax than the Thunder might end up doing in like their first 2 years once they actually enter the tax, just to like, you know, be at the top right now. Just crazy how the
While
Thunder
we're here,
made
I have a
this work
Thunder
out.
question.
Yeah.
How much room do they have to decline Jalen Williams' team option and
He
make him
doesn't
restricted?
have he doesn't have a team option as far as I think it's just the non-guarantee.
Oh, it's just so they can't make him restricted?
No, so they're gonna have to
Oh,
extend them or trade him.
well, I mean, he's an interesting buy low trade candidate. I think Jalen Williams is good. Big Jalen Williams
Yeah,
before. Forward
yeah,
Jalen Williams, I would hope we think he's good. He made all NBA.
yeah,
Um, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Jay Will is really good, and the Thunder were just they had he was just a luxury there. They didn't end up having to play him really much at all in the later rounds. Wizards, I guess they get a second. So the Thunder then didn't they give up like 5 seconds to get the first to get Dylan Jones?
I
I
don't
think it
even
was something
remember at
like
this
that.
point. Their draft trades are a total wash to me.
I think that's what it was. They traded 5 seconds to the Knicks to get this first, and now they traded a second to get off him. So the just burning. I think that's what happened. Just burned 6 seconds. But moving on, Miami. This will probably no. Then we have something else. But yeah, Miami. They are re-signing Davion Mitchell, 2 years, 24 million. I actually like this for both sides. I projected him to get something a little lower, but for longer years. I think I had him at like 3 for 24. Here he basically gets it for 2 years, so he gets a higher amount, but you keep it shorter. So he's back now. Though there, it's going to lead to a decision as far as the rest of the roster because they didn't get Kevin Durant. Doesn't seem like they're gonna get any All Star anytime soon. In which case, they're probably gonna want to avoid the tax. Right now, after re-signing Davion Mitchell, I've got them projected to be about 6 million into the tax. So the big question is, what are they going to do with Duncan Robinson? He's got that early termination option. Uh, if he picks it up, it's only guaranteed for about 9.9 million. So they can cut him, and they'd get under the tax. They'd be like 4 million under the tax, get under the first apron as well. They could also potentially have him opt out and resign for maybe that guaranteed portion. So maybe you get him at 10 million. So the Heat are finally starting to make some moves. Yeah, any thoughts on all this and how it might relate to any other bigger plans they got going on?
Okay, first of all, Davion Mitchell, I think that's a good deal for both sides. Having him below the full mid level, I thought like he played well enough that I would have felt comfortable as an outside team giving him multiple years at the full mid level in Miami. If the shot is real with his defense, that's a very valuable player. And I think for him, it made sense to only do 2 years because now you get out to unrestricted free agency relatively early and you're in an environment in Miami that tends to get guys paid. So all you really have to do is play well for 2 years, and you probably enter 2027 free agency in a pretty favorable place. But yeah, my question for Miami is like they seem to have this Jonathan Kuminga interest. Is the plan just to like, can we get a little bit younger, get more upside in? It seems like Andrew Wiggins is maybe not super long for Miami. I would think he would be somebody that would be going out if Kuminga is going in, with him basically replacing him both on the balance sheet and in the lineup. So, I mean, the Lakers are a team that's been mentioned for Wiggins. The Warriors, if they were going to do something with Kuminga, they obviously know Wiggins, and it would make sense for them to bring him back. There are some tough mechanics there, obviously, as far as matching the salary, but I do think that's something that makes some sense. So my thought here is they're probably not thinking Wiggins is there long term. As for Duncan Robinson, I think he's probably overpaid. So something in that neighborhood where he either resigns at a lower number or they just waive him to get under the tax. But like he has that $10 million guarantee. If I were him, I'd be pretty happy with that. And I would kind of just be thinking, okay, I'm going to hit free agency. I think I can do a little bit better than Miami, right? I think I can get to a team that can take better advantage of my shooting, right? Well, like, what if I could get to Denver and my movement with Jokic's passing is so powerful, right? Like when Duncan Robinson was at his best, it was when he and Bam were running those DHOs and they could really take advantage of what Duncan did as a mover with a high IQ big. Maybe that's something you would think about, right? Like I think Duncan Robinson may be overpaid, but he's a good player. And I would kind of like to see him on a team that is a little bit more ambitious than Miami is right now. Miami kind of just seems like it's treading water. So I'm keeping an eye on Duncan Robinson.
Yeah, we're gonna find out tomorrow what happens. I honestly don't have any like lean on which way it could go, whether they keep him or cut him or trade him. I feel like it's all like 33, 33, 33. Uh, so we'll see what happens. But I do think the conversation on him would be drastically more positive if he wasn't making close to $20 million a year. If he's making like $10 million a year, something closer to Sam Merrill, like what he just got, I think that would be a very nice value contract for the Heat or whoever has him. Um, I when I say I like the Davion deal for both sides, like I actually mean that. Like I don't like to be the guys like, oh, I think this makes sense for both sides. This is good for both sides. Like as I alluded to earlier, right now I like the Naz Reid deal more for him. I like the Sam Merrill deal more for him. I think this deal makes a lot of sense. You keep it short. Where I had him thinking, I was thinking he'd probably get something a little closer to his qualifying offer, that 8 million. So instead, they give him a little bit more, but keep it short, and really give and see if whatever he did in the second half of last year, if that's for real, and if yeah, then I'm sure they'd be happy to give him a longer contract. So I think this makes a lot of sense for both sides. Um, I just don't know if they have the pieces the Warriors want to in a Jonathan Kuminga sign and trade, because I don't think the Warriors are necessarily looking for a haul, a bunch of picks or anything like that. I think they just like we did the exercise on the Warriors mock off season. They're just looking to bring in, I think at a minimum, players that are better fits and can and helps, because right now their whole issue is how are you gonna get that outgoing money, and signing trading Kuminga is the best way to go about it. But I just, I mean, like, does anyone on this roster really scream like Steve Kerr guy? Because my feeling is if the Heat really want Kaminga, they'll probably need to get a third team involved to get players that the Warriors would want.
Why wouldn't you just want Wiggins back if you're Golden State? Is that just too big a salary for them to take in, you think?
I I don't think that makes sense for the Warriors to have Wiggins and Butler and Draymond. It's kind of like a lot of the same issues that they were afraid of
Wiggins
when.
is Wiggins is a better shooter than Kuminga is, and he's better on defense too. Where like you can legitimately switch very easily 2 through 4 if your 2 through 4 is Wiggins, Butler, and Draymond. I think they'd be more open to that than they would to keeping Kuminga. You obviously have cost control, you have culture control because you know Wiggins and you've had him in the building. But yeah, I mean, I think then if it's not Wiggins for Golden State, then it's Wiggins to a third team, and like who that wants Wiggins has something that Golden State would want. I don't have a good answer to that, right? Like the Lakers are frequently linked to Wiggins. Would the Warriors want Rui Hachimura? My instinct is probably no. I know he's a much better shooter than Kaminga, but I think the concept there of the offense centric power forward, they would rather probably just keep Kaminga at that point, right? I don't think he's like a great fit for the way they play offense with, the motion and everything. So I don't think the Lakers really make all that much sense. You'd have to go out and find a team that really wants Wiggins, and I don't know who that team is.
The other thing why I don't think the Warriors would be interested in bringing back Wiggins is salary. Where even if they make the sign and trade work, like it's Kaminga and maybe they also include Looney, and they're not really sending out anybody under contract, so all they're doing is bringing back his money. They still have other needs, I think. When we did the exercise, our dream target was Jaren Jackson Jr. and Lonzo Ball. So yeah, with Wiggins, you kind of get a little bit of Lonzo Ball, but they that's a whole lot of money than $26 million. It's going to be really hard for them to get a stretch big after that. So I think they're good on wings that like aren't necessarily great shooters, and I think they I think they kind of want to diversify their 30-ish million below the second apron, spend a good amount of that to bring in a stretch big who could defend, try to get a point of attack defender. Maybe that could be D'Anthony Melton coming back. That's something we discussed. Um, yeah, I could be wrong. I just don't really see it being Wiggins. So It just would have to be a third team at this point. If you can get a team to send the Warriors a couple players they like. I really like the Bulls. I thought the Bulls basically had the players like Lonzo Ball, like Kobe White, like Nikola Vucevic, who's been linked to the Warriors. I think they made a lot of sense as a trade partner. My feeling is that the fact that they're no longer sending the possibility for the Warriors to get Lonzo Ball is gone. And the Bulls went ahead and got a wing in Okoro that I guess they're out on Jonathan Kuminga. So maybe they could facilitate something. Just some thoughts I have. We'll see how it plays out.
Well, something with the Bulls is there have been some rumblings that Kobe White is still very much out there. I do wonder if the Warriors, in something where Kuminga was going out, they could use that money to bring Kobe White in and send some draft capital to the Bulls, because Kobe White would be the secondary shot creator that they really need. He doesn't really fit defensively, but offensively, I think he'd be great there.
Yeah, we were like getting pretty like when we were planning the mock trade deadline. I was like, let's get Kobe White to the Warriors. I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, well, I still think that as a facilitator, I still think the Bulls make sense. I just with Buzelis there, with Okoro now there, they drafted a Sengay. Well, how does maybe the Bulls still try to get Kuminga? Maybe they still value him like that and don't care about the fit. We'll work on it later, but uh, I just think the Heat have they definitely got to get a third team involved because I mean who on the Heat right now, like other than Wiggins, do you think would interest the Warriors?
There's no
Hawkes?
one there really, because like Duncan Robinson would be good for the Warriors, but they have Buddy Hield at half the price doing the same
Yeah,
thing. So there's not
not
really,
not at that price.
yeah. So like there's not really anything there. It would have to be like a big convoluted multi-team thing. But like I could see a situation where the Heat get Kuminga, the Warriors bring in Kobe White's money, and like Wiggins or some other Miami guy goes somewhere else. I don't know how exactly you do it. I'm just saying that like Kobe White is the kind of player that I think Golden State would want, and he's seemingly pretty available.
I would think that if the Bulls are trading Kobe White, maybe it makes sense to bring back Pajemski in a pick. Because if you're bringing in Kobe White, if you're the Warriors, yeah, there is value in keeping Pajemski at his really low salary for the next 2 years. But long run, you can't really fit both. I don't think you can really pay
That's
both
an
players. And
interesting straight up trade. I like that for both sides. I know they think that he's a future all-star or whatever they said. I'm trying to like check the cap math on this on how far the gap is, but like you could do Kobe and for Pajemski, and then you're like $9 million short, but maybe
I'm
a Kuminga sign and trade fills it. Like that makes sense.
yeah, that exactly. Kaminga and Podemski to bring in Kobe White.
You'd want to
Might need
get
to get a
something
third
else
team
for
involved.
Kaminga. Like I think asset wise, Kaminga and Bajemski for White doesn't make much sense. You could probably want to bring in more. It's just the money is going to be tough. But broadly speaking, basketball wise, Pajemski for White makes a lot of sense because Kobe is better today and the Warriors are trying to win today. And Pajemski is the longer term, cheaper guy. So that makes sense for the Bulls who are far away. I think that's like a pretty straightforward trade that does make sense.
Kaminga and Pajemski, maybe a pick for Kobe White, Vucevic. Warriors then re-sign Melton. Boom.
Well, but like also you can fit Kobe into the non-tax mid-level if you're the Warriors. So you could just absorb him that way and then figure out Kaminga some like there are a lot of ways you could do this.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely still interesting. They could be trade partners. There's some rumblings that the Kings could be involved for Kaminga, which
So very
makes a lot of
Vivek.
sense. Yes, makes a lot of just checks out. But you know what? The Kings have some interesting players that can interest the Warriors. Maybe I think Jonas Valanciunas could make sense there.
Jonas
Um,
Valanciunas just isn't good anymore. It's not even that he's a player archetype that makes that he's just not a good player anymore.
um, I feel like there might be something there. We'll see. So last thing we wanted to touch on. So the Celtics are reportedly open to rerouting Anfernee Simons to another team to help save money. So I think the idea of how this would work is if you just look at the Porzingis trade, where they could have just done a two-team trade with the Hawks, traded Porzingis there, and gotten Mann and Niang and that pick. and they wouldn't have really saved any money. They would have saved maybe like 4 million, something like that, which is exactly what they did in swapping Holiday for Simons. So can you expand this trade and make it so instead of bringing back Simons, maybe you're bringing back another guy making like around 10 to 15 million. So then you're saving in the aggregate maybe like 15 to 20 million, something like that. And then that would get them below the tax and get them like far enough below where they could potentially bring back both Al Horford and Luke Cornett. And then they could keep everybody else. They don't have to trade Sam Hauser now. They don't have to consider trading White or Brown. So, who are the Simons teams that you've got in mind?
The Bucks are the one that makes the most sense. Like, I know Kevin Porter Jr. was pretty good when he got there. You're not going into next season with Kevin Porter Jr. as like your secondary scorer. No. They need somebody else who can put the ball in the hoop. And they also just like need some long-term upside in that building. So the Bucks make some sense where like maybe it's something with Portis or like Kuzma doesn't save you that much money. But the other thing you could do is could you trade Simons for Kuzma in an unprotected swap somewhere in there? Because I'd really like to get my hands on a Buck swap. Something like that I think would make some sense. Another team I'll throw out there to you, and there's a whole other complicated conversation to be had with them right now, is the Grizzlies, where I don't think they wanted Desmond Bane as like a 40, $45 million high scoring shooting guard. I wonder if they might be willing to take in Simons and make him the sixth man, where he's making less and you can justify that. So something I'm thinking is you trade Cole Anthony into somebody's mid-level exception. That's how you clear the money for Jaren. And then you offer something like KCP and Conchar, with Conchar going to another team for Simons, and that basically matches money. And your plan going into next season would then be we're starting Jalen Wells at the 2, Cedric Coward at the 3, and Simons is going to be our sixth man. Does that make any sense to you?
That makes some sense. I think a little more simply with the Bucks, and I would guess they can easily make the money work with just Portis and Connaughton, which again, like the Celtics, the main value is not so much who they're bringing back; it's just the money saving. Maybe they could get some sort of draft equity from the Bucks to make it worthwhile. So maybe you send Portis to a team like the Lakers or Clippers who could use a big man, and then the Celtics only take back Connaughton and picks. I'm thinking something a little more basic like that, just based on how the Porzingis trade went. This is kind of like the equivalent of that. Uh, any other teams you have in mind?
He is a hard guy to move. I really struggle just to find the Grizzlies as the second one. It would have to be like a young team that really wants the upside, and like maybe that would have been Washington, but they picked Trey Johnson. So no. Maybe that would have been Charlotte. They just picked Concanippel. They don't have a starting shooting guard slot open. No, like, do you have anybody else? I'm struggling. Like, I'm sure somebody likes the talent enough. If you're not paying assets, you're just taking on money. I'm sure that team exists. I'm struggling to find it.
I think the Pacers in theory right now make some sense, but I think I really struggle to see how they make it work without giving up anybody that they value more on the roster. But I just like the idea with Halliburton out, Simons on a 1 year deal as a stopgap option. I think would make a lot of sense. I thought about the Heat, where if you can turn Rozier, reroute him to another team, maybe you trade it and it only costs him like a couple seconds. Okay, maybe there's something there, or you can do Duncan and other salary filler. Just because if you got nothing else better to do with Rozier's money and you can bring him in, I think that'd be a great move for them this year.
That being said, though, Hero and Simons as your backcourt, you are going
I
to have a bottom 10 defense in the
you
NBA.
I
Pretty
think so. So I would say that they do this with the idea of bringing Simons off the bench.
yeah, and
Um,
starting Mitchell.
yeah, starting Mitchell with Hero, and then because if with the Heat, um, like you're bringing in Simons, if only costs you like a couple seconds, then you don't really have you only have him as like a 1-year rental, and it's like, okay, let's see how you do. Let's see if we have a fit here. Um, for all we know, Simons was heading for like a reserve role had he remained in Portland. Like ideally, that's what the Blazers would have wanted. So I think if you're the Heat, just play things out, have him come off the bench, and then if he plays well enough where another team offers him like the same amount of money or more to start elsewhere, all right, he walks in free agency, or you might end up re-signing one of the best six-men guards for more, reserve type salary range.
Can we talk about this from Boston's end just for a little bit, where it seems like their priority is not to duck the tax, it's to create enough money to re-sign Horford and Cornette. Cornette, I get. I'm a little confused as to why re-signing Al Horford is a priority for them, because Al Horford, like any year, could be his last. He could decline meaningfully at any time. Al Horford was very, very good last year. Let me be clear. He was the closest Celtic I came to picking for all defense. I thought he was their best defensive player last year. Obviously, still make threes, still a good passer. They're not competing for the championship next year. So I don't know why bringing Horford back and thinking in 2 years he's still going to be where he is when he's in his 40s. I just don't think that really makes sense. I would be heavily prioritizing keeping Cornette. And honestly, like we've talked about the Derek White stuff ad nauseum. There was the reporting today that they wanted a Mikal Bridges price to move off of Derek White. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you give him up cheap. I would have been a little bit more open to hearing out like reasonable offers for him, not demanding 200 cents on the dollar. I would have been thinking, can we trade him for several first round picks and then just turn around in a year and trade those picks for a 5 years younger version of him? That would have been my priority. So I personally disagree to the extent to which Boston seems eager to keep older players, but that's just me, and Brad Stevens is very good at this. So I might trust him over me, but that's what my thought is.
I just think it's about the price. I think if you gave them truth serum and you asked them what would they like, I think they would prefer that there is a team out there offering that quote unquote Mikal Bridges trade for Derek White, so they can reset the timeline a little bit and restock on a lot of picks and hopefully have like one or two high lottery picks where they can try to turn things around within the next 2 years. But so we'll see if those offers actually come. As far as Horford, I understand where you're coming from. I think it's just one of those things where it's like, what if that's what he wants to do? If he wants to continue in Boston, I think they owe it to him. And it's not like they need any. It's not like they are going to have a ton of flexibility to get anyone else. Who else can they really get that brings more value on and off the court than Horford? So if that's what he wants to do, then I think they just bring him back. I understand it. It's just a matter of what does he want? Does he just want to continue in Boston and maybe even see if he still has another year beyond this in him for when Tatum returns? Or does he want to try to compete for another championship now, in which case he has a lot more options out there for that? Sam, any
Well,
closing
so I'll
thought?
ask
Oh,
you this though: would you rather have him or Cornette? If you can only re-sign one, because it might come down to that. Would you rather re-sign Cornette or re-sign Horford? I am clearly Cornette. I don't know where they land.
probably for me, Cornette. Yeah, I don't know where they land. I don't. I'm not looking too deeply into this. Um, we'll see when they end up falling. Maybe they can also save some more money, like they have Kata and Tillman. Can they move Tillman as well to help the possibility of bringing both back? Because I also think if you're like, yeah, they can have. They had a lot of big men last year. They had like five centers at one point, so it's not like a foreign concept to them. But um, I do, just given the constraints and how much they should reasonably spend, knowing that they're all in all likelihood not going to compete for a championship. I do think every dollar counts at this point. So if you do want to bring back both, try to make it make sense where you could at least, stay below the second apron at the end.
Yeah, I mean they're going to be below the second apron. Like I don't think there's any scenario where they go above it. I would just say like you have to be realistic about what the timelines here are. And I think Al Horford's most value by far is in the 25-26 season, and they're just not a team that's equipped to take advantage of that. Like I disagree with, setting this high a price for Derek White, but I understand the impulse to bring Derek White back. Derek White is probably still going to be Derek White a year from now. I just don't know that Al Horford is going to be Al Horford. I do think Xavier Tillman is good, by the way. Like, I think he can play, and I think he just kind of got stuck in a situation in Boston where his skill set didn't really fit what they needed, right? Where, like, Porzingis and Horford were the shooters, and Cornette was this just killer rim protector, and Cato was the dunker, the roll man. It was like there wasn't really a niche for him as a big in Boston, but I think he can play, and I would like to see him on a team that actually uses him. So I do kind of hope that he can get off that roster.
Only 1 year guaranteed at the minimum. Shouldn't be hard to move off
Lakers.
him.
He could be a 15 backup center.
Any closing thoughts before we end this?
No, because I feel like the longer we go, the likelier we have news. So, like, let's go let some news happen, and then we'll come back if we need to. But yeah, I think tomorrow, hopefully, the ball starts get rolling on some stuff. So, we had kind of I was expecting a little bit more. I wanted some fireworks today. We got, I don't know, what's Lonzo for Okoro? Is that like a single firecracker?
I mean, Lonzo Ball is one of the most, he's a very popular player,
Ooh.
like for not exactly for basketball reasons. So I think that might be, I think that is somewhat of a firework.
A single firework singular. You don't hear about those very often.
Everyone, make sure to read CBS Sports. Sam is going to be posting very regularly, reacting to all the transactions that they happen. And follow him on Twitter at Sam Quinn CBS. Sam, thank you for stopping by as always. Make sure you're following me on Twitter and Blue Sky. My name is Yossi Goslin. I have been reacting to all the transactions with instant salary cap analysis. Best time of year to follow me. Have me on notifications, and make sure you subscribe to Third Apron wherever you get your podcasts. Sam and I will probably be more active throughout the next week and a half. Stay tuned for whatever we've got in store, and subscribe to the Third Apron newsletter. I'll see you guys soon.